Welcome, everybody, to the FinOps and Focus final session. My name is John Bonney. I'm the CFO at Harness, and we're going to talk about the CFO's Guide to Cloud Financial Strategy today. And I've got a special guest with me here today. I'd like to let him introduce himself here.
Hey, everyone. Anil Valarapalli, CFO at Airbase.
All right. Well, let's get into it, Anil.
Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about how CFO cloud costs have evolved, right? So we've been in the industry a long time. We've seen the cloud costs rise exponentially over the years. What do you think is different now? Like, are you noticing anything different? The way people approach cloud costs? Like, is it become just a line item in the budget, or has it become something bigger and different?
Yeah, look, I think that when we talk about the complexity of cloud compute right now, you have to look at the business models of the companies that we're talking about, right? Every business model of a company is going to drive the largest factors for cloud compute. You know, are you a product-led growth model? Are you a usage-based pricing model? How innovative are you in the space of AI right now? Is that driving up your compute costs? And so I think it feels like for the first time in about 10, 15 years, we have a lot of dynamic changes occurring at the same time. That's why we're here for this session and to understand a little more.
Yeah, no, great point. I mean, one of the things we see a lot is sort of this tension that can sometimes rise, right, between, we'll call it the engineering or the technology teams, as well as the finance teams or the FinOps teams, right? And sort of how do you juggle, that accountability between the two, right? And like, any tips or thoughts or ideas of how you make it so everyone understands it's important, but we can also manage it together?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. For us at Airbase and for the companies I've been at, it's really focusing on the culture of spend at the company. Okay. And what I mean by that is driving a clear and deep partnership with the stakeholders around the company. So example, your finance or FP&A leader working very closely with the PMMs or the PMs and engineering managers. And why that matters is so we understand, what areas are we testing?
Yeah.
What areas are things that are kind of, consistent revenue run rate? We feel good about a product. Yeah. What areas are we really, we don't fully yet understand. Yeah. However, we're going to call that risk out and it's okay, but let's make sure we watch that closely.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. We have a similar, challenge in that, cloud costs, right, as they rise, they're also, typically are not the easiest to predict, right? And some of the, research that we've done seems that, there definitely needs to be this gap of sort of teamwork that we build between engineering and finance, right? And FinOps, right? But I'd be curious, as you've been in your couple companies, and so how do you end up organizing, people together to come to that shared common goal?
Yeah, I think, number one, it's leadership at the company agreeing and acknowledging that this is something we need to keep a close eye on. Yeah. And it is something that matters to us as a company. Okay. I've worked at companies before where, a couple weeks of not monitoring could actually materially cost you your cash balance. Yeah. And that's an example of companies where we were leveraging the AWS spot market. Yeah. And we were one of the largest users of the spot market at that time. Yeah. Effectively, a financial product itself. Yeah. And so, part of the thing is that we build this partnership across the company. We have to acknowledge, like I said earlier, how closely are we monitoring it on a daily basis? Yeah. How do we have controls over when something looks abnormal, right? And I'd like to think we have a good feel on 90 to 95% of it. And there's always that risk of, we're innovating in a new team, a new pod who's running something and testing something. Yeah. And that's something we have to call out and, at the same time, understand we may learn some things over the next 6 months.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I think we have some great practices around sort of alerting, right? Yeah. Systems that can help you and alert you when you have anomalies that are unexpected. Right, because the thing that will always happen is companies that are rapidly innovating, moving to the cloud, right, moving workloads, there's always going to be an opportunity where cloud costs can be introduced that are unknown and people don't know they're coming, right? And so, that's a very good point. All right, so we haven't talked about AI in a few minutes, but what are you thinking about? The industry. I saw some crazy statistics where, Gartner believes that the $700-800 billion cloud market now, is going to grow another 20%, right, over the next several years, and a lot of that is being driven by the AI workloads and demands and all those other things. I mean, how are you thinking about that in today's day and age? And how do we manage that better? How do we think about it? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think number one, how do we think about how AI is going to drive our strategy over the next 18 to 24 months. There will be agentic AIs that teams across the company will end up leveraging through new products, right, and new businesses that we partner with. Example that we're seeing clear-cut ROI on is how can we bring in agentic AI into the customer support workloads, and how can you have 20 to 30% of your tickets actually end up being distributed to that, right? And so and then separately, how are we as a company going to be innovating on AI internally, and what are we going to be leveraging there, and how are we going to be testing it? So I think it's about getting organized first as to what does AI mean for us as a business, and then subsequently how are we going to drive costs and hopefully revenue in the future from it.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, one of the areas we talk a lot about cloud costs, right? And that's the point here. But for us, as we think about it too, there's a couple areas. One is, okay, is there waste, right? Can we find where we can find identifiable waste that we can eliminate that has no impact on sort of innovation or the production of your customers? And that's something we, software and AI and things can help with that, right? And then there's another element of it, which is, to your point, looking at sort of the margins and you're using cloud to deliver your services to customers, right? And so how else can we think about it as almost, instead of always just a cost driver, but also a strategic revenue driver as well?
Yeah,
and a margin driver.
It's super important. I mean, if you think about if we as finance leadership and operators at a company can find unlocks for us to be more efficient, or B, drive more efficient growth, we've fulfilled our duties as strategic partners to the business. There have been examples of prior companies of mine where we've been able to find that if we shut off, call it excess testing in certain time periods of the day, we're actually going to drive an additional 2-3% in margin favorability.
That's huge.
And so when we as finance leaders come to the table with engineering management or platform, or whoever's leading the platform team at the business with these types of insights, that's kind of how we get the buy-in that we're providing value to one another here.
I think it's a great point about, it kind of gets back to education and alignment too. I mean, I think historically, finance and engineering, as we mentioned before, has been so separate, right? Or FinOps and engineering. And now if we can kind of bring together sort of common goals, shared goals, but also just education on why the cloud cost matters, and why working together on it can mean a big impact to the bottom line, but also a company's success ultimately, right? So speaking of that, one of the other areas that I think the industry probably needs some help on, in my view, is benchmarking. Right? I don't know how you think about it, but if you think about any sort of industry around, right, there's always a pursuit of benchmarking to understand what does good look like, right? And I don't know how you think about it. A couple of things we've thought about is looking at drivers of, what is your non-production cloud cost per developer, right? Or what is your, production cost as a percent of your ultimate delivery of your value of unit to your customer. But I'd be curious how you think about it. Like, do you think we could do a better job benchmarking in the industry?
Yeah, I think, well, first let's talk about why we care about benchmarks. We care about benchmarks for the context. We want to understand, when we try and pattern match ourselves as a business, as a company, how do we compare to others, ideally, that are providing a similar service to us, right? And so you're always trying to find the benchmark that looks right to pattern match. And ideally, you look at it and you say, oh, great, we're performing well against this benchmark. Or you say, we're right at average. Why? What can we be doing better? And in a worser case, what you end up doing is finding out that you need to improve. I think that driving that type of visibility at the business is actually helpful across leadership and with the finance partnership, with the tech teams, for us all to understand, why should we care about this thing? How are we measured externally? And I think that how we're measured externally, the actual metric itself, whether it's 80% margins, 85% margins, whatever that may be, is evolving right now. Right, we don't know where it's going to settle. As we discussed, there's this concept of DeepSeek just came out a week and a half ago. It is definitely throwing a wrench into what we thought costs were going to be, and for the favorable, for the better.
No, absolutely. Well, that's great. And then as you think about the future of financial cloud cost management, right, and partnership, we've talked a lot about sort of how important the partnership is with engineering. Sort of having strategic alignment on what the goals and the plans are. Any other things you would add, as we think about, again, navigating inevitably a very large cost line item for any company doing business in the cloud? Any other kind of parting thoughts on best way to manage that as a company going forward from a CFO perspective?
From a CFO perspective, I'd say that our finance teams play a critical role. And the fact is we are not there to say no. we're also not there to be a hammer. I'd like to say we're a velvet hammer.
Yes, there you
Right.
go.
And so we come in with kindness and empathy and understanding that these folks are at the cutting edge of leveraging new technologies. And what it takes for us to build a strong partnership is having empathy and an understanding for how we each can improve on a daily basis. So there may be a week or two where we find our costs for some reason have shot up. Right. Our job in finance is to help dig so deep into that with a natural curiosity that we empower the company to learn more about itself.
Love it.
And so I think that is, the culture of spend that I like to talk about, and breathing that consistently across the business. It can actually, can have a virality to it.
Yeah. And Neil, thank you so much for coming in. Great discussion today. Really appreciate you sharing your insights today.
Thank you for having us.
Great. And thank you everyone for listening to us today, and have a great day.